right, here we go. Sit Down Zumock podcast underway. This is me, has-been baller, the king is stupid, the Z-Man, Chad Zumock, coming live and direct from Cincinnati. I'm still in Cincinnati. I'll be at the Dayton Funny Bone this weekend with Godfrey, and guess what? I'm coming back to Dayton the week after that, June 1st and 2nd. I'm headlining Wiley's Comedy Club. 3 shows. If you know anyone in Dayton, if you're from Dayton, get your ass on down there. Headlining 3 shows. And if you're part of the $3 Gunner Club on Patreon, I'll get you in for free. I take care of all the people signed up for Patreon. And thank you so much to everyone that signed up. I know some people they got out of it. Now they're getting back in. If you could spread the word, that'd be great. Just $3 a month. That's nothing. That's nothing. You get additional content, bonus episodes. You get all kinds of perks and rewards, like free tickets to my show. I'll mail you an autographed copy of my album, t-shirts, bracelets, stickers, tour posters, you name it. Hit up the patreon.com/sitdownzumock. Bookmark it, share it, do what you do. Do what you do. Okay, this week's episode's a doozy. I'm happy to bring it to you. Some people might be reading the description, not knowing who this guy is. Benjamin Thomas Wolf. Who is he? And if you do know who he is, what happened to him? If you live in Chicago, if you lived in the 5th District of Illinois, Benjamin Thomas Wolf ran for Congress, U.S. Congress, and he made a lot of noise. A lot of noise. He was on headline news, Fox News, CNN. He was pretty radical in his approach. He was a Democratic candidate. He wanted to legalize cannabis. He was the cannabis candidate. He made a viral video about the AR-15, how he wanted to ban AR-15s, and it went viral. But his backstory and his connection to me is what's interesting. I've known Ben since the 7th grade, and he's very connected to this podcast. And you're going to want to listen, if you love my podcast, to see how he's connected to the podcast. He's a big part of it, actually. So you're going to really enjoy that little unveil, my little Sixth Sense unveil. But Ben has a great backstory. He was an American diplomat. He was in the FBI. He was, for years, worked for National Security Division on the highest priority. He was one of the first responders to 9/11, to the Pentagon. I mean, Ben's story is unbelievable about how he went from doing all that to running for Congress. And then after he lost, he just disappeared. And if you go online, you Google Benjamin Thomas Wolf, there's a lot of news stories out there. And it's interesting in this day and age with news stories and fake news, how if you just create some noise, people start talking about you, whether it's good or bad. And Benjamin did just that. He created some noise. He hired an outside marketing firm to create stories about him, and it was all over the place. But he just did it as more of a social experiment. And you know what? He's going to write a book someday about his run for Congress, because it was really interesting, his approach. He never ended up winning. I think the guy who won he's been in office for like 18 years. I forgot his name. But it's a great story. He's connected to this podcast. I know people kind of tune in sometimes just for the guest, and some people might not know. I'm telling you, some of the guys I have on here that you don't know, like Justin Silver. I mean, people know Justin. He has his own podcast. But there's like good podcasts that I've done with some people. Give it a listen. If you're on a treadmill, if you're driving somewhere, it's 1 hour. It's free content. And then if you like it, share it. Or drop $1 at the Patreon. Drop $3. Drop $20. Do what you got to do. But give it a listen. I think you'll enjoy it. I just didn't have him on just to have him on. He has a great story. So let's sit back. Let's listen. Enjoy the Sit Down Zumock podcast. Holla!
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down, Zumock.
I've got at least one pair of good shoes in the back of the closet somewhere.
I'm an American. I am. I come from a family with a proud, strong American tradition. My grandfather served in World War II. My dad served in Vietnam. And I served at Applebee's, so... Bunch of bullshit. Bunch of bullshit. Bunch of bullshit.
Sit down, Zumock.
Hit me!
Sit Down Zumock podcast in full effect, coming live and direct from Kent, Ohio, my hometown, ladies and gentlemen. And listen, let me tell you something. This is Patreon only, and the reason why it's Patreon only is because we are dealing with some serious shit right now. I'm sitting in one of my childhood homes. I don't want to give out the address, but let's just say
it's my childhood home.
It's,
not yours.
well, I stayed a lot of years here. I remember sitting in this room trading baseball cards with you. I don't know if I should give you a proper introduction or not, but let's go ahead and give you one. I already talked about it in the intro. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if I should give you your Congress name, Benjamin Thomas Wolf, or
Benjamin Thomas Wolf.
or
Yeah.
Ben Wolf, the one guy I know from high school. I don't know when Thomas came into effect, but here we are.
It was all about branding.
Branding. Before we get into your whole backstory, let's just talk about the importance of you in my podcast. And I just want you to say 3 simple words. Can you say sit down, Zumock?
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down, Zumock.
Can you say it again?
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down, Zumock.
I'm going to splice your 7th grade voice in between.
That's smart. So do people know the background of that? Does anybody actually know the story behind it?
I've talked about the story because people go, why you call that? They're like, well, sit down, Zumock. That sounds stupid.
It's brilliant.
And the reason why, Ben, you go ahead and explain this for my listeners who've listened to this podcast since 2013. Not only that, we played it on WMMS in Cleveland since 2009.
Okay. Well, I think it was 1989? 87 or 89. We were in 8th grade. It was our 8th grade Washington, D.C. field trip, which changed my life and your life.
Yeah.
So the history of this goes, in 8th grade, most schools in the Midwest, they take a trip to Washington, D.C.
Right.
The 8th graders get to go to D.C. You spend a weekend away from your family, probably for the first time for many of them, including myself and you.
Right.
You take the bus with a bunch of your buddies. You stay in a hotel overnight.
Cost like $100 to go or something.
Yeah, we had to pay a little bit of money,
Right.
which it was worth it. And, you're worried about, you get to spend a night or two in a hotel with some of your buddies, so you figure out who you want to stay with. And you load the bus, you get on the bus, and from Kent, Ohio, which is where we are right now, in Kent, Ohio. To
Very
Washington,
surreal, by the way.
Oh, it's great. It's a great city.
No, very surreal to do this right now in your home.
It's perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from Kent, Ohio to Washington, D.C. is a 6-hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
We'll say 5.5. And the exact halfway point is Breezewood in Pennsylvania. Remember Breezewood?
Of course, because I actually travel as a comic, and every time I go past Breezewood, I think of we're about a half mile out of Breezewood. Inside joke between Mr. Willis. Go ahead.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So you stop in Breezewood, where you can get off the bus, you take a break, you use the restroom, you get some snacks. And he wasn't my teacher, it was the history teacher of the high school, Mr.
It was my
Willis.
history teacher.
And he gets up on the bus.
And he was the chaperone.
Right. And actually, you got to back up even more. I was recording everything. I had a tape recorder because my brother did it the year before. My brother, Rob.
He recorded it.
He recorded it, and I listened to him. I thought it was a great idea. So I recorded it. I took the
Really?
same
I didn't
tape
know
recorder.
that?
Yeah, same tape recorder, a little, handheld audio cassette recorder. And I recorded everything, and we went around and we interviewed people on the bus, and we talked to, all of our classmates about their hopes and dreams in Washington, D.C. And I think we were a little ways outside of Breezewood, and Mr. Willis stands up and says something to the extent of, we're almost in Breezewood, and when we get there, you'll want to put your shoes on.
And that's for put your shoes on in the intro.
Put your shoes on, and then you stood up, and you weren't supposed to, and that's when he yelled at you. He said, "Sit down, Zumock." And of course, mocking him, I said, "Sit down, Zumock," in my Mickey Mouse voice.
Yeah.
In 8th grade, and we recorded it because the tape was still rolling. And I gave you that tape years later, and I think you turned it into a techno song. If I'm
No,
not mistaken.
my roommate, I told the story to my buddy Mike Levicki, who was in the Fat Five. We later went on to do the Fat Free, and he was like getting really in like music production, and he heard the tape and he thought it was hilarious. So he made a techno song out of it. Mm-hmm. And one of the highlights, not only is this podcast popular, but the highlights of that song is I remember in Kent, Ohio, there was a dance club called Screwy Louie's. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
He gave the tape to the DJ. He says, please play this. Gave him $20. Put Sit Down Zumock on, and everyone on the dance floor is dancing to it. I'm going to play at the end of this interview.
It's a good song. I saw it on iTunes. The techno song is actually really good. It's Mr. Willis yelling at you and me mocking him. It's perfect.
People are dancing to that song.
That's great.
Because it was like right after, at this time it was like 1996. I don't even know what the song was at the time.
Decades later. And now you still use it for the intro to your whatever it is whatever this is.
It happened today. I swear to God. It was because I came home. I'm here for a couple days. I was at Giant Eagle in Stowe, and a guy who used to listen to me on the radio goes, "Sit down, Zumock." It's like a thing, man.
It's a real thing.
It's crazy. It's so surreal.
It's funny, but
and you're part of the origin.
Yeah, that Washington D.C. trip actually became a big part of my life. I remember
how.
Well, we got to go to D.C. for 2 days, and I remember loving being in Washington, D.C.
Sure.
Loving it. There was an instant
And some people
connection.
might listen to this might know you from a certain area. Mm-hmm. So this is different. A lot of my listeners don't know your backstory. Mm-hmm. So let's
talk
into it.
about it. Sure.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
So that trip to Washington, D.C. changed my life significantly.
Sure.
I felt an instant connection to Washington, D.C. Instantly. The Smithsonian and walking around D.C., I felt like it was my home. Yeah. I had only been in Kent. I grew up in this little town here.
We're in your childhood home as we speak.
We're in the home I grew up in. Yeah, I mean, I'm here fixing it up, so I'll be here for a few months.
No, it's very surreal.
It's a beautiful home.
It's fucking weird.
Can you say that? Can you say?
Yeah, it's a podcast.
Oh, okay. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, you could say the N-word. I don't care.
Maybe we'll get to that. We'll see. So we go to Washington, D.C. in 8th grade, and I fell in love with Washington. I felt an instant connection, and then I remember standing on the steps. I told the story during the campaign, and we'll talk about my congressional campaign. Standing on the steps of the Lincoln Monument, looking out of the reflecting pool, and just being mesmerized by this city. You look off in the distance, you see the reflecting pool, the Washington Monument, the Capitol, the White House. You can see everything, and I stood there just transfixed. And I think it was you came over and interrupted my train of thought and said, "What are you doing? What are you looking at?" Like an idiot kid would say. And I said, "You know what? I really like it here. I think I'm going to live here one day."
Yeah.
And everything in my life was to get back to Washington. Everything. All of the classes I took in college.
Since the 8th grade.
Since that moment. And I did internships, and I applied for jobs. In my senior year of college, I went to Kent State, the amazing Kent State.
That's where I went.
And there was a program called the Washington Program in National Issues, WPNI, where you're a college kid, you get an internship, and you go to D.C. for your last semester with the political science department. And I did it, and that's when I started working in D.C., and that's when I met some FBI recruiter. And that was the beginning of my federal
how'd you
career.
start working in D.C.? Like, did you get an internship?
I got an internship on Capitol Hill, and then
doing what?
I was an intern working for the Republicans, for the Republican National Committee. It was the only internships they had available. I don't know.
Is it
I didn't
paid?
do anything. No, it was unpaid. I didn't do much, and I made it pretty clear I wasn't there to work.
Right,
I
you
was
were just
there
trying to learn.
I was trying to learn and fool around and
Find
get to
your
know
way.
DC, find my way. They gave me some responsibility. I basically didn't do anything. I did what all interns do. You run around looking for a job. And it was great. It was a great opportunity just to be in D.C. and find out what a big city is like coming from a small town, what your opportunities are later in life.
Right.
So it was perfect for me. And that's when I stayed after graduation. I stayed with my brother for a bit. He was at George Washington University, and that's when I met an FBI recruiter, and that's how my federal career started. It was strange.
Well, I remember that happening. I remember you started working or getting involved with the FBI, and I was just like, what? All right.
Yeah, I met a woman, and she said, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I'd like to work for the FBI one day. And she said, well, you're young. Why don't you come to my office and we'll talk about it? And I did. This is back when they had recruiters, and this is, God,
I think I remember
1999.
they did a background check, and I was one of the people that contacted.
Oh, I'm sure. They contact everyone.
Yeah, they contacted me, and they're like, I go, yeah, he's cool, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I was 22 years old. What is there to talk about?
They're like, what do you know about him? Like, I've known him since the 7th grade. I don't know. He's fine. He's cool. Whatever. Played baseball.
Yeah, and that's all they're looking for. They're looking for, does he have a track record of being a good person? Does he have integrity? Does he work hard? And enough people said yes, that, I passed the background check. You have a polygraph, which is 5 hours of just humiliation.
In a polygraph, what do they ask you? Everything, like sexual stuff?
Everything. They didn't ask me sexual stuff.
That's interesting.
It's more about your character.
Right.
They're asking you about theft and guns and, racism. They ask you about your racist
I failed all three.
tendencies. Yeah, they ask you finances, what are your, what do you want to do? What are your motivations for working for the FBI? And, they ask you everything. And it's tough. It's frustrating and stressful. And meanwhile, you're going through physical tests. And,
when you pass that, are you just like, oh, cool?
no, you don't need to ask if you passed. You either know or you lied. You just walk out sure of yourself.
For me, I'm going to lie. So I'm like, if I get away, I'm like, yes. Well, celebration.
The point is, a polygraph, you're not supposed to lie, and if you do, they are supposed to be able to tell.
I'll figure it out.
You'll beat that test.
Yeah,
of course. When you go work for the FBI,
Google search, I'll figure it out.
That's right. So I started working for the FBI in 1999. I was an unarmed investigator for a national security branch, working counterterrorism, counterintelligence investigations. It was incredible. I was 23 years old, graduated from the FBI Academy. It was like a dream come true.
Well, I remember you during this time. That was a very surreal moment especially from a kid from Kent. I remember holy shit, our buddy Ben's in the FBI. That's great. And I don't want to keep jumps. I got to move forward. But you were like one of the first responders at 9/11, right? At the Pentagon. How did that happen?
I was part
2011. I was still in Kent, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, most people were.
I was still in Kent. I remember when 9/11 went down.
Yeah, I was part of the evidence response team and part of the hazardous materials team, and clearly there was an incident. So my team, we were running surveillance. We were some of the first people over there.
So you got the calls, come to the Pentagon?
No, there was no calls. All the radios were down. You just looked across the river and saw it.
Did you see the smoke
coming? Yeah, of course. You couldn't miss it. It was coming out of the Pentagon, clear as day. And so me and my team went over, and
Where were you at? How far away?
Oh, we jumped down off the highway onto the grounds of the Pentagon. We were right next to it. Well, as close as you can be with the fire.
Refresh my memory, because I'm trying to remember. The plane went into one side of the Pentagon, right?
Plane went into one side of the Pentagon. Obviously, there are 5 sides to that Pentagon. And it flew down close enough to the road that it was clipping telephone poles. It went over Arlington Cemetery and impacted, fairly hard in the building, enough that the wings where the fuel was exploded off, and most of the fuselage and where the people were sitting just shoved into the building. It was a massive explosion, and then it just burned for days.
You know who I can get on the phone right now, and it would blow your mind.
Who
is the guy who killed Osama bin Laden? Robert O'Neill. I'm friends with him.
There's a lot of stories about who killed bin Laden. There's a lot of books have been written, and
Robert O'Neill's the guy from SEAL Team 6. He's the guy who pulled the trigger.
I think he wrote. He wrote the book? I
yes.
believe. Yeah. I think a few of them then later pulled the trigger. He was probably the original trigger puller.
He's the trigger puller. Yes.
That's great.
He told me the story. He's going to be doing my podcast. Yeah. We just haven't set the time or date.
I don't celebrate the death of anyone, but that was a big deal in American history.
In my opinion, that's a good death.
Yeah, it's a big deal. My career actually followed bin Laden's career. I was hired by the FBI working counterterrorism because of the bombings in Africa. They were looking for more investigators. And then when I went to the State Department.
Because after bin Laden, they wanted to follow up on what the hell's going on out there.
Yeah, they needed investigators. They needed counterterrorism specialists. So with the FBI, and then when I went to the State Department, I was working overseas in counterterrorism at different American embassies throughout Africa and the Middle East. And so after he was killed, it was really kind of strange to know that my government career was probably coming to an end also. There was really no more mission for me.
So bin Laden has actually created job opportunity for people within the FBI.
Yeah, it's weird.
He makes my life hell when I'm going through.
Yeah.
I was just coming from St. Louis to Ohio, and I had to go through fucking TCA or TSA, and I had to deal with that. Like,
It's crazy. There's a lot of jobs in security because of these things. It's unfortunate and it's sad, but there's
Every time I
the
take
government
my
makes a lot of money off of this.
every time I take my shoes off and my hat, my jacket, I go, "Fuck you, Bin Laden."
Yeah.
Every single time.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
So you got that. That's a cool opportunity, and you get to see the world. You get to go around, and you're doing all this cool stuff.
Yeah, the FBI was great. I was domestic for most of that, and then with the State Department, when you become a diplomat or part of the Foreign Service, you live overseas. So I was living in Africa and the Middle East. I was traveling with Condoleezza Rice for a few years.
Yeah, as a childhood friend, I saw photos of you and Condoleezza Rice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
By the way,
she's
Browns
wonderful.
fan.
She's a Browns fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wanted to be. I think she wanted to be commissioner of the NFL. That was her dream job.
Really?
Yeah, she loved the Browns.
So how'd you get to know? Like, how'd you become assigned to her?
It's something you put, you voice interest in, and then you're selected to her team.
Yeah.
And you travel with her for 2 years. She's the assignment, the Secretary of State's detail and part of her staff. And you're with her every day. She's
You got to know her?
a little bit, as much as anybody would know they're protected. Yeah, she's nice. She's professional. She's quiet. She was real serious, incredibly intelligent.
Really?
So we traveled with her and the president a lot overseas. That was a
Who was
great
the president
career.
at the time? George Bush?
George Bush.
Yeah.
George
Did you get to
Bush.
know him?
Again, not that much. He had Secret Service, but as much as anybody gets to know their protectees.
As a kid who played high school baseball, did you talk like baseball with him since you loved?
No, I didn't talk baseball.
No?
You don't just shoot the shit with the president.
You don't? You just
No,
go,
you're not
hey,
really
let's throw the
supposed to.
baseball around. Let's talk.
No.
What do you think
it
about
doesn't
Jeff
work that way.
Bagwell and
Mark Grace?
who was the second baseman for the? You got your baseball cards right there.
I brought him down for you.
Who was the second baseman? There was Jeff Bagwell.
Ryan Sandberg.
No, that's the Cubs. I'm talking about the Astros.
Jesus, I don't know.
Oh God, it's driving me a blank.
Craig Biggio.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
That's an impressive memory.
That's an all-star, tops
Yeah.
all-star right there.
Well, they were all on steroids. All of
that
them.
whole era. Yeah, I know.
After we stopped collecting baseball cards in 1991, everyone was on steroids. Everyone.
Were you around when they went to Capitol Hill? It was like Bonds.
I heard about that, but
You didn't watch it?
No.
It is the most embarrassing thing of all time. Like watching Roger Clemens lie under oath.
I mean, these guys weighed 250 pounds, all muscle. It was ridiculous. And how they didn't know this was happening.
He's like, I
is
misremembered.
crazy. I misremembered. I mean, listen, it was good for baseball. They were crushing home
great.
runs. It was great for the fans.
I want them all back on roids. I don't
People
care.
loved it. Yeah.
If they
I
wanna
guess
die
they're
at 40,
all
go
taking
ahead.
Steroids, it's different. It's an unfair advantage, let's be honest.
It is, but who cares? It's my entertainment.
I don't care. Yeah.
I went and saw the Avengers, and I don't care if they're on roids. It was
You don't care if it's science fiction or real. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I agree. It doesn't matter.
So after the FBI, you kind of toned down. By the way, I'm petting your dog.
Yeah. He's here. He's here in
dog.
Kent. He loves it here. Yeah, after the FBI, State Department, and then 10 years at the State Department, I wanted to finish my PhD, so I went to Chicago.
Yeah, and now that's when things get a little crazy because I lose
amazing.
touch with you, and it's just, we live life, whatever. We meet people, and we grow, and I'm online. I'm on Facebook, and I'm just kind of scrolling through my feed, and I see a video, and it's a video of you with an AR-15, and millions of comments afterwards. I mean, I'm exaggerating the number.
I think it was millions.
It was just
Sounds like my campaign.
All right, what the? I look. First of all, I start laughing because I know you from the 7th grade. I go, what's going on?
Yeah.
And you're running for Congress.
Oh, yeah.
In what district?
The 5th.
Fifth district of Chicago Congress
Of Illinois, yeah.
Illinois, the same area of Osama, or not Osama bin Laden.
Rob Blagojevich. Rahm Emanuel.
No, our president. I'm drawing a blank.
This president or the real President Obama?
Oh well, whatever. Who you believe in? I don't care. I have no sides here.
There we go.
Obama. Osama
Yeah.
bin. So why do I keep saying Osama bin Laden? Like you said.
They're very similar.
Yeah. So it's like the same district. Is it the same district?
No, his was South. He
He was a South Sider.
He was a little bit.
That's
south,
why he's a
yeah.
White Sox fan.
That's right. No, I had a great public service career, and
What makes you want to run for Congress?
That's just it. I had a great public service career, and I saw that as being an extension of that public service. And
'Cause-
I thought it was an incredible opportunity to do something great for the people of Chicago and for the
Before
country.
we get into this, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, take your
You're
time.
a private guy. Like
Very
when I
private guy.
when I met you, you weren't on Facebook. You don't like. I was telling you about social media. You're like, I don't do that. I don't do any of that. I don't care.
None of it. I had
None of
no social media. I had no digital footprint. Sorry, I'm eating now.
And I'm a comedian, so I'm on that.
You have tons.
And I was trying to tell you about this, and you're like, I don't care. I don't give a crap.
I didn't want it.
4 years later, you're all over the place. You got thousands of Twitter followers. I'm like, what's going on?
Millions.
Yeah. So how's this happen?
Well, when you run for office, it's a campaign. You need to publicize what you're doing. You need to talk about it. You need to get a following. It's no different than a campaign is a startup. It's a business. It's public service. So you have to promote what you're doing and your cause and your ideas. So I had no choice. I got on social media. We created websites and platforms, and
And what
amazing.
What made you do this? Because you wanted to do an extension of what you were doing. You wanted to help people.
yeah, I thought it would be a great way to build a better community. You know, Chicago needs new elected officials at all levels. This is what I kept saying. Chicago needed, and the state of Illinois needs elected officials at all
Who was
levels.
the guy who ran, who won like forever?
Everyone. They never
No, who was the
lose.
guy
The
who won?
incumbents never lose in Illinois. That's the problem.
Yeah. Oh, we could stop it, and we could come right back.
Jesus, my dog is going crazy.
No, we can come right back.
Give me 1 second.
All right, no problem. We'll be right back. All right, we're taking a little commercial break, but at this point, if you want to join Patreon, you could be part of the 3-Point Shot Club, $3 holler. You get bonus episodes like this. Go to patreon.com/sitdown Zumock. That's patreon.com/sitdown Zumock. Now, back to the conversation with Benjamin Thomas Wolf. So, Ben, we were talking, and you were talking about
Why I ran for office.
why you ran for office as, former FBI. Okay, I don't know the title. I'm a complete idiot. I'm a comedian.
That's okay.
I'm a
We've known
comedian.
that. You are. We've
Interviewing somebody who's done real stuff.
known. What was the question?
You were a former FBI
I was an FBI investigator.
investigator,
Yeah.
and now you're becoming a
Congressman.
congressman.
Was.
Yeah,
we put together a really incredible campaign. We catered to a lot of young people. We were really trying to get people under 40 to vote because historically they don't. And it was really important to get people's attention. So one of our big policies and platforms was the idea that, of banning machine guns and banning these assault weapons. And I had one.
you owned an AR-15.
I owned, still do,
Yeah.
AR-15, and we thought it would be a really nice way to get people's attention and talk
Now, how do you
about-
buy an AR-15? Do you just walk into like any department store,
They're usually not a department store. They don't sell them at Macy's, I suppose. But
like Dick's?
I don't know if Dick's sells AR-15s.
Where can I buy an AR-15?
Any gun shop. There are gun
Like a
shops-
machine gun. I can go buy a machine gun right now.
Sure.
Really?
Well, you can't get automatic machine guns, but you can get semi-automatic machine guns or assault weapons. I don't know what people
So is the
call them.
AR-15 semi-automatic?
Semi-automatic, meaning
Okay.
every trigger pull you're firing one round. Exactly. And the faster you pull it, the faster they fire.
Did one of the school shooters have that?
Lots of the school shooters have those.
What about the ones in Columbine?
All of them had those.
Really?
Yeah, that's why we made the commercial. We talk about the fact that was the same weapon I carried, or a model of, in Iraq. I was overseas in these war zones and conflict zones, and that's what we carried.
They gave you AR-15s.
Yeah, we actually carried M4s.
Did you ever fire one when you were overseas?
Of course.
Really?
Of course.
Like at enemy territory?
Oh,
or?
mostly women and children.
Are you serious?
No.
Oh. That would have been great.
That would be great. No.
Yeah.
No, it's what the military carries. It's what special agents like myself carry overseas. It's what we use to defend ourselves and protect others. And,
Do you have to do training for this with the gun?
lots of training.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots.
You're pretty good with shot.
Yeah, pretty
Really?
good. Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. Yeah, so we wanted to make a point that the same weapons soldiers are carrying and special agents are carrying and people are carrying in war zones should not be sold here in America to civilians. And so we made a commercial, and
That thing went
filmed it.
viral.
Oh, well, it went viral because it was right after was it the Parkland? Where,
I think it was
the
Parkland.
Florida shooting. And we aired it on the Ellen DeGeneres show the day she had the survivors.
Oh my God.
So it went crazy. We got lucky. We talked to NBC or whoever, and they aired it. It just happened to be on that day.
I mean, I just happened to be, because I didn't know what you were doing. I hadn't talked to you in a few years. I'm like, what the hell? And I start digging a little bit deeper. I go, this is insane.
Oh yeah, that I think that commercial really put us on the map. And you know, we kept saying during the campaign, you've got to make bold moves. You've got to do things to get people's attention. Without attention, they don't know who you are. They don't know your name. They can't vote for you, and you're just another person.
Was a guy who, in comedy, it's completely different, but you have to make noise in order to get noticed. Okay. Like, there's so many comedians out there. Like, I know my skill set. I'm good as a comic. I can do what I can do on stage. I get hired. I'm full time. But at the same time, how do you get noticed? How do I become Joe Rogan? How do I become Sebastian Maniscalco? And it's like, you got to make noise.
I don't know who any of those people are.
They're huge comedians.
Joe Rogan, I've heard of.
Yeah,
I thought he's the WBA guy. Or
no, he's a UFC guy.
UFC guy.
Yeah, he has a whole background in that. But his podcast is the most popular podcast.
You know what? We reached out to him.
1.5 million downloads. Go ahead.
When we started talking about cannabis, we reached out to him. So we did the AR-15 video.
Yeah.
What else did we do? We did the cannabis stuff. Where
he's huge on cannabis.
We took a photograph of me smoking a joint and put it out there, and I think that's
by the American flag.
Yeah, that's when things got really.
And that's when you were on headline news. You were the cannabis candidate.
Yeah,
that became a whole thing.
A whole thing. Fox and Friends had us on.
It was a whole visual. There was you smoking weed by the American flag,
which is funny to have a former special agent, a former FBI employee, a former diplomat, a professor now smoking weed publicly. But again, this is something that is medicine for tens of millions of Americans.
Sure.
It's great for tax revenue. It's a great substance. It's an important thing for us to be talking about now. Legalization will happen in all of these states. It's just a matter of time. And again, we wanted to be out in front of it and show, hey, I'm willing to stand up for what I believe. Vote for me.
Right.
And it got us a lot of attention. A lot.
Well, I mean, enough attention where I'm watching.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're in Ohio. I mean, people all over the country were calling me. Literally all over the world were calling and saying, "What the hell is going on in Chicago?"
Yeah.
And it was.
What was the most shocking contact? Anybody any notable person?
Yeah.
You're like,
the people from Pornhub called me. Wow. Did I tell you this or not? Did we talk about this?
I think
you might have known this. Well, let me tell you the story.
Tell the story.
It was actually, it's incredible. So this advertisement, or the photo of me smoking weed, goes around. Yeah. And I get an email from a guy who is one of the executive advertisers or marketing guys at Pornhub. And he writes an email and says, "Hey, we should talk, because the demographic of cannabis users is almost identical to the demographic of porn viewers or adult content viewers. They are usually under 40. They are usually men. And if you're catering to cannabis users, you should be catering to porn users." So we had a long conversation, and he said, "Benjamin, you should really be advertising on Pornhub." I said, "Well, I'd have to talk to my team about advertising on pornographic websites or apps, whatever it is." And we talked about it as a campaign staff, and they were freaking out. They absolutely not. We cannot do it. It's terrible, terrible idea. And I called back into the Pornhub guys, and I said, "Listen, has anyone ever done this? Has any politician ever in the history of porn done this?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, then I want to be the first." 100%.
That's amazing.
I'll tell you something else even better.
That's amazing.
We had a very small budget. Remember, the campaign is almost over at this point.
Yeah.
They put in more money than we did. We put in a very small amount, and they tripled what we put in, because they knew, A, we get a lot of attention, and B, they knew it could open up a whole nother part of marketing for them. If they can start getting politicians to advertise, because it's really cheap. Any of you listening, you should advertise on Pornhub.
I want to.
Chad,
right
I'm
now.
telling you, it's so cheap. I'll give you the guy's number.
Really?
It's so cheap.
I'm going to do it right now.
If you give them $100, you are 1 out of every 10 refreshes.
God damn it.
I'm dead serious.
Right,
you
let's
should
talk
do it.
off to the website.
Okay, deal.
I need to get some people signed up.
So
on
that
this
happened,
Patreon.
and then we got even more attention, and then people voted, and we lost.
Right. But it was a good campaign because it was very grassroots. You were kind of an unknown. You came from out of nowhere, and you went against some established people that have
Very
been in the
established.
system.
We were fighting everyone from the mayor all the way down through all the congressional seats. It was pretty awesome what we did. We had a great campaign staff, and I never got to thank them enough. I could not say thank you to what these people were doing. We had people. It was all volunteer. We didn't pay a single person. And you're constantly recruiting, trying to get them to believe what you believe and believe in the positions and the policies and to vote. And that was our big thing, is we just wanted young people to vote.
Right.
And in the end, when you look at the results, less than 4% of people under 40 voted in that district. And you can't win an election with those kind of numbers. It's
Wow.
too bad. It's really too bad.
How many people were on your campaign staff?
I think we had between 10 and 15 full-time. They were
these
there
people
every
were
night on the
volunteering.
weekends. Oh, and then we had dozens, if not hundreds of people throughout the campaign. Hundreds.
And these people just believed in what you were talking about.
Well, they believed in the idea of, universal health care, legalizing cannabis, banning assault weapons, the progressive, I guess you call them the progressive ideology, the Bernie Sanders platforms that people know of, things that help the working class and the lower classes, the important things.
So not a lot of these voters, I mean, I don't know if people are seeking you out, wondering what the hell happened to Benjamin Thomas Wolfe. Like, what do you say to the people that actually went out and voted?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is the greatest honor of my lifetime, and it's on our website, our engagement page. And I was just my heartfelt thank you to everyone, saying thank you for being a part of the process. Thanks for volunteering. Thanks for voting. We did not win, and now it's time for those people to go and keep pushing and find new candidates and new ideas. And, I'm going to finish my PhD and move on with my life. I had an incredible experience. It was the most challenging, rewarding, frustrating, most interesting experience of my life.
Well, it was cool for me as a person that's known you your whole life to watch you step outside your comfort zone to do that.
Yeah.
So to be a public guy, because you're not you're a private guy.
Very private.
And so it's interesting to watch a guy who just throws himself. He's on headline news, CNN, and all the major webs. I mean, it was very surreal to watch.
Yeah, that photograph, the story behind the photograph is I knew that we needed a photograph of me smoking weed. And I knew that because one of our campaign consultants, good friend, said that, Benjamin, all you need to do is hold a beer in front of an American flag and say, vote for me. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I think we've got to do better than that. And the cannabis thing became a big topic. And I said, let's have a picture of me smoking a joint. And we did it in my apartment. And I had this old, if you look at the photos, this flag, it's a painting from DC that I bought. John Stango's the artist. And we set it up in the apartment. And I just took a couple puffs of the joint. We took a couple shots and it worked. And we actually leaked it to the Sun-Times. I had a buddy that worked for them. I said, hey, if I have a picture of me smoking cannabis, do you want it? And I sent it to him, and I'm not kidding you, an hour later, Chicago Sun-Times had it. 10 minutes later, it was around the world. The Israelis were writing about it.
You were in the Tribune, the Reader,
All
everywhere.
I mean, that picture changed everything. It
was very cool.
The first politician to ever smoke a joint, the first politician to ever advertise on adult content sites. We made history, and I think we pushed the national conversation in those topics, and that was the point, to get people's attention, to get young people to vote, win or lose. We were there to change history.
And for people who put their time, they went to the voting booth and they wanted their candidate to win. It's interesting that you came back to your hometown, Kent, Ohio, which we grew up in, to fix up your family's home and just live a comfortable, normal life.
It was hard. That campaign is it's 14 to 15 to 20 hours a day. Every day, there's no money in this. And I knew that after that I needed to just, we lost. So I'm here to relax, kind of lick my wounds, figure out what's next, fix my house. I'm finishing my PhD. I'm done with my classes. I need to finish this dissertation, and I need to figure out what's next. I had a great government career. I had a really interesting political career, and now it's, what's next for me?
Yeah. It's a great story. I was actually fascinated. I was impressed. I can't believe you've had this very storybook career or a storybook life with your career.
I don't know if it's a storybook life.
It's interesting.
It's interesting.
Because I can go back to you being the left-handed pitcher, in junior high school and high school, and just us dicking around and
as
goofing around,
young
being
people do.
silly and And then next thing you know, you're running for Congress and you're in the FBI. It's a cool story. And also the voice of the Sit Down Zumock podcast.
Most importantly.
Out of all your benchmarks.
The other thing is I need to just keep moving. I need to keep moving forward and evolving as a human and as a man and as a father and as an adult. I think that's important.
Well, as a comic, too, I'm the same way. It's like you got to keep going forward.
Yeah, you're pushing your own career at this point. And,
Yeah.
I'm going to figure out what's next. And as long as it's interesting and, I get to keep traveling and moving and pushing things that I believe in. This is my one human experience. I say that a lot, and it sounds a little cosmic, but this is my one human experience, and I really want to push that to the limit. If I only have, I'm 42 now. If I only have 20 or 30 years left or less, I want to make my mark on this world and put my small dent in the universe. So I have to keep going. I don't know what's next. We're trying to figure that out. I may be doing some writing. Somebody's approached me about writing a book.
Right.
I may be writing for, some cannabis magazines or news publications. I want to keep. I think cannabis is a really interesting thing right now. Just socially and economically, I think it is the next big movement in America, and I'd like to be a part of that as well.
Benjamin Thomas Wolf. He's not on Twitter. Well, he's on Twitter, but he doesn't log on anymore.
You know what? We have all the social media. I don't use it anymore.
It's there.
It just sits there.
Nobody can contact you at this point.
I think they can still contact me. I look at it once a day to see if anybody contacts me, but it's not my thing anymore. The campaign's over. I'm gonna figure out what's next.
I will link it to this article for people that are wondering what happened to Benjamin Thomas Wolf. And no, it's interesting because as a comedian, like it's you're running for different causes, but we're constantly campaigning and promoting and benchmarks, doing things.
Yeah.
I mean,
like I said, whether it's a business or a startup or you promoting yourself or a product, it's all the same.
Yeah.
It's all the same idea. You just keep pushing and keep working, and you've had an interesting career, and you'll keep going and you'll keep traveling, and the important thing is just keep going. That's what we said every day. Just keep going. One more day, one more hour. Just keep moving forward.
All right. Can you get one more sit down Zumock before we close this out?
Which one do you want?
I want the I'm going to say your 42-year-old version. I'm going to play your, how old were you at the time?
13.
Say you, then I'm going to put that and we're going to close it out.
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down, Zumock.
I've got at least one pair of good shoes in the back of the closet somewhere.
Sit down. Sit down, Zumock. Sit down. Sit down, Zumock. Sit down. Sit down, Zumock. Sit down.
Sit down, Zumock. Sit down, Zumock.
Get your shoes on.
Sit down, Zumock.
Get your shoes on. Sit down. Get your shoes on. Sit down, Sonic. Sit down. Sit down, Sonic. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down, Sonic.
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down, Sonic. Sit down. Get your shoes on. Sit down, Sonic.
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down. Sit down. Get your shoes on.
Sit down, Zumock.
Get your shoes on.
Sit down, Zumock.
Sit down. Sit down, Sonic. Sit down. Get your shoes on. Sit down, Sonic.
I've got at least one pair of good shoes in the back of the closet somewhere.